Abuja basked in the golden light of a serene Saturday morning. With its sleek skyscrapers and bustling streets, the city was alive with the hum of progress. It was a city where dreams were forged and fortunes were made, and Stanley Okafor embodied its spirit. At just 32 years old, Stanley was a tech entrepreneur who had built a multi-million-dollar empire, designing cutting-edge software that revolutionized Africa's transportation systems. To many, he was the epitome of success: handsome, wealthy, and highly intelligent. Stanley lived in a sprawling mansion in Maitama, a neighborhood known for its affluence and exclusivity. His home was a masterpiece of modern architecture, adorned with floor-to-ceiling glass windows, minimalist furniture, and a high-tech security system that rivaled anything in Silicon Valley. Every corner of his mansion spoke of luxury and innovation, from the AI-controlled lighting to the automated voice assistant that managed everything from groceries to music playlists. Despite his material success, Stanley's heart was drawn to a simpler joy: love. 6 months ago at a tech summit in Lagos, he met Lara, a lawyer with a mind as sharp as her smile was warm. Lara was the kind of woman who commanded attention effortlessly. Her intelligence, kindness, and unyielding determination made her stand out. She was the perfect blend of beauty and brains, and Stanley found himself drawn to her like a moth to a flame. Their courtship was swift but genuine. From dinner dates at exclusive restaurants to spontaneous weekend getaways to Dubai, their love blossomed against a backdrop of luxury and adventure. Lara was everything Stanley had dreamed of: a partner who challenged him intellectually and supported his ambitious goals. As their relationship deepened, Stanley decided to take the next step. On a cool evening under the stars, during a private dinner on the rooftop of his mansion, he proposed to Lara. The moment was perfect, with soft music playing in the background and the Abuja skyline twinkling like a sea of diamonds. Lara said yes, tears of joy streaming down her face as Stanley slipped a dazzling diamond ring onto her finger. The wedding preparations were nothing short of a fairy tale. Lara insisted on a celebration that reflected both their personalities: elegant yet modern, intimate yet grand. The Transcorp Hilton Hotel was chosen as the venue, a symbol of prestige and sophistication in Abuja. Invitations were sent to Nigeria's elite, including business tycoons, celebrities, and political figures. On the morning of the wedding, the atmosphere in Stanley's mansion was one of excitement and joy. His groomsmen, dressed in sleek tuxedos, joked and laughed as they prepared for the big day. Stanley, clad in a custom-made suit, exuded confidence. Yet beneath his polished exterior, there was a flicker of nervousness. Not because he doubted his love for Lara, but because he knew that happiness always came with a price. In another part of the city, Lara was a vision of grace. Her wedding gown, a masterpiece designed by one of Nigeria's top fashion houses, sparkled with intricate beadwork. Her bridesmaids fussed over her, ensuring every detail was perfect. Lara's heart swelled with anticipation. Today she was marrying the love of her life, a man who saw her not just for her beauty but for her strength and character. As the sun began its descent, casting a warm glow over Abuja, the wedding ceremony commenced. Guests arrived in luxury cars, stepping out in designer attire that turned the venue into a runway of glamour. The ballroom of the Transcorp Hilton was transformed into an ethereal wonderland, with cascading flowers, shimmering chandeliers, and a color palette of gold and ivory. When Lara walked down the aisle, the room fell silent. All eyes were on her, but her gaze was fixed on Stanley. As their hands met at the altar, a wave of emotion passed between them. This was their moment, the beginning of a life filled with love, laughter, and shared dreams. The pastor began the ceremony, his voice steady and filled with warmth. He spoke of love's enduring power, the importance of trust, and the commitment they were making. Stanley and Lara exchanged heartfelt vows, promising to stand by each other through every trial and triumph. It was a day of pure joy, a celebration of love and unity. Yet in the midst of this happiness, the shadows of the past lingered unnoticed, waiting for their moment to emerge. Stanley's success had always been a magnet for attention, and with it came both admiration and envy. His life seemed picture-perfect to the outside world, but not many knew the turmoil he had endured before finding Lara. A year before meeting her, his life had been consumed by chaos, thanks to his ex-girlfriend, Glory. Glory wasn't just anyone. She was a former beauty queen, known across Nigeria for her stunning looks and poised public persona. The first time Stanley saw her, she was standing on the red carpet at an elite gala in Abuja, dressed in a shimmering emerald gown that accentuated her flawless figure. She had an enchanting smile and a confidence that could light up an entire room. For a man like Stanley, who was accustomed to the best, Glory felt like a prize he couldn't resist. Their relationship started like a dream. Glory was charming, affectionate, and seemed genuinely interested in Stanley's ambitions. They went on extravagant dates, dining at the finest restaurants, vacationing in private villas, and attending high-profile events where they were the center of attention. Stanley enjoyed the spotlight, and with Glory by his side, he felt invincible. But it wasn't long before the cracks began to show. Glory's beauty masked a temper that could erupt at the slightest provocation. She demanded constant attention and validation, and any perceived slight would lead to explosive arguments. At first, Stanley chalked it up to passion. He thought their fiery fights were simply a sign of how deeply they cared for each other. But as time went on, her outbursts became more destructive. One night, after a minor disagreement about a work-related text Stanley had received from a female colleague, Glory smashed his custom-made wristwatch against the floor. On another occasion, after Stanley canceled a dinner date to attend a last-minute investors' meeting, she keyed his Lamborghini out of spite, leaving long, jagged scratches across the sleek black paint. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a pattern of behavior that left Stanley feeling drained and frustrated. Till he stayed. Part of him was drawn to the chaos, to the intensity of their relationship. He told himself that love was supposed to be messy, that Glory's fiery personality was part of what made her so captivating. But deep down he knew that their relationship was toxic. The final straw came on a night that Stanley would never forget. He had returned home early from a business trip, eager to surprise Glory after days apart. As he walked into his luxurious apartment, he was greeted not by the warmth of his girlfriend but by the sound of laughter. Her laughter, coming from the living room. When he stepped in, he found her wrapped in the arms of another man, their smiles fading as they noticed him standing there. The betrayal hit Stanley like a punch to the chest. He didn't yell or throw accusations. He simply turned and walked out, his heart heavy with disappointment and anger. That night he ended things with Glory for good, blocking her calls and messages, determined to move on. But Glory wasn't ready to let go. She bombarded him with desperate calls, swinging between tearful apologies and fiery accusations. When he ignored her, she showed up uninvited at his office, causing a scene in front of his employees. She posted cryptic messages on social media, insinuating that Stanley was the one at fault for their breakup. She even went as far as spreading rumors about him within Abuja's elite circles, hoping to tarnish his reputation. For months, Stanley dealt with the fallout of their toxic relationship. He poured himself into his work, using his growing tech empire as an escape from the emotional turmoil Glory had left behind. When he met Lara, he felt like he had finally found peace. Lara was everything Glory wasn't: kind, patient, and grounded. The Lara love felt easy. There were no dramatic fights, no destructive outbursts, just mutual respect and support. But while Stanley was moving on, Glory was sinking deeper into bitterness. Her once glamorous life had started to crumble after the breakup. Without Stanley's financial support and the prestige of being associated with him, Glory's lifestyle began to unravel. Her sponsorships dried up, and the high-end brands she once represented moved on to younger, less controversial faces. She blamed Stanley for her misfortunes, refusing to take responsibility for her own actions. As Stanley and Lara's relationship became more public, Glory's jealousy turned into obsession. She stalked their social media pages, watching as they shared photos of romantic vacations, charity events, and intimate moments. Each post felt like a personal attack, a reminder that Stanley had replaced her with someone better. The engagement announcement was the final blow. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, Glory's thoughts became consumed with Stanley and Lara. She couldn't bear the thought of them living happily ever after while she languished in obscurity. She began to plot ways to ruin their big day. At first, her plans were petty, spreading rumors about Lara's past, sending anonymous threats to Stanley's office. But when none of it worked, she decided to take a more direct approach. The night before the wedding, Glory sat alone in her dimly lit apartment. The glow from her phone illuminated her face as she scrolled through photos of Stanley and Laura. Her fingers trembled with anger as she read the captions, filled with words like love, forever, and soulmates. She couldn't understand how Stanley had moved on so easily, how he could replace her without a second thought. Her mind raced with plans to disrupt the wedding. She envisioned walking into the ceremony dressed to kill, and exposing Stanley for the liar she had convinced herself he was. She rehearsed dramatic speeches, picturing the shocked faces of the guests as she revealed all the dirt she had gathered on him. In her twisted reality, this wasn't just revenge, it was justice. The day of the wedding arrived and Glory dressed with care. She chose a striking red gown that hugged her figure, ensuring that all eyes would be on her. As she stood in front of her mirror, she whispered to herself, "If I can't have him, neither can she." With that, she grabbed her keys and headed out, her mind set on ruining Stanley and Lara's perfect day. The Transcorp Hilton Hotel glimmered in the evening sun, its grand ballroom transformed into a scene straight out of a fairy tale. The air was thick with the scent of roses and jasmine, and soft music from a live orchestra filled the room. Abuja's elite had gathered for the event of the year, Stanley Okafor's wedding to Lara Adeyemi. Guests arrived in style, stepping out of luxury cars and dressed in designer outfits that turned the occasion into a runway of opulence. Inside the ballroom, everything was perfect. Cascading floral arrangements in shades of gold and ivory adorned the tables, while chandeliers sparkled like constellations overhead. A massive LED screen displayed a slideshow of Stanley and Lara's most cherished moments, smiling photos from vacations, charity events, and candid shots of their love story. The atmosphere buzzed with joy and anticipation. Stanley stood at the altar, looking dapper in his custom-made tuxedo. His heart raced as he glanced around the room, seeing the faces of family, friends, and high-profile guests who had come to celebrate this milestone. But when he saw Lara walking down the aisle escorted by her father, his breath caught. Lara was a vision of grace and beauty. Her wedding gown, a masterpiece of lace and beadwork, shimmered under the lights. A soft veil framed her glowing face, and her smile radiated pure happiness. The crowd gasped in admiration as she walked past, their eyes fixed on the stunning bride. But for Stanley, the rest of the room faded away. All he could see was the woman he was about to spend the rest of his life with. As Lara reached the altar and placed her hand in Stanley's, a wave of emotion washed over them. The pastor began the ceremony, his voice resonating with warmth and authority. He spoke of love's power to overcome all obstacles, of trust and unity, and the sacredness of the vows they were about to exchange. The room was silent, save for the pastor's words and the occasional sniffle from an emotional guest. When it came time for Stanley and Lara to share their vows, their voices were steady, but their eyes glistened with unshed tears. It was a moment of pure love witnessed by everyone present. Just as the pastor raised his hands to pronounce them husband and wife, the doors to the ballroom burst open with a loud bang. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as all heads turned toward the entrance. There, standing in the doorway, was Glory. She was a striking figure in her crimson gown, her makeup immaculate and her posture defiant. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Stanley, and a smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. The room was frozen in shock as she began to walk forward, her heels clicking against the polished floor like a drumbeat of impending chaos. "Stanley," Glory said, her voice loud and unwavering, "I can't let you go through with this." Stanley's jaw tightened as a wave of dread washed over him. Lara turned to him, her brow furrowing in confusion. The guests whispered among themselves, their shock and curiosity palpable. "Glory," Stanley said through gritted teeth, "what are you doing here?" "I'm saving you from making the biggest mistake of your life," Glory declared, her gaze shifting to Lara. "And you," she sneered, "you think you can just replace me? You think you're better than me?" Lara's expression hardened, but she remained calm. "This isn't the time or place for your drama," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "You need to leave." Glory laughed bitterly. "Oh, I'm not leaving," she said, crossing her arms. "Not until I've said my piece." The room was thick with unease. The once joyful atmosphere had turned tense, and the guests looked on with a mix of fascination and discomfort. Security guards began to approach, but Glory held up a hand. "I have every right to be here," she said, her voice rising. "Stanley and I have history, real history." He loved me once and I know he still does. Stanley's face was a storm of emotions, anger, frustration and embarrassment. Glory, enough, he said sharply. This is my wedding and you have no place here. But Glory wasn't done. She turned to the crowd, her voice dripping with venom. Did you all know that this man, this so-called perfect groom, lied to me, betrayed me? He made promises he didn't keep and now he's pretending like I never existed. Before she could continue, Laura stepped forward, her eyes blazing with determination. That's enough, she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. You've had your moment. Now leave. Glory blinked, momentarily stunned by Lara's boldness. But she quickly recovered, her lips curling into a sneer. You think you can handle him, she spat. You have no idea what you're in for. I know exactly who Stanley is, Lara shot back, her voice unwavering. And I know who I am. Your theatrics don't scare me and they certainly won't change anything here. The crowd erupted into murmurs of approval and a few guests even clapped. Glory, realizing she had lost control of the situation, faltered. Her confident facade cracked as security finally reached her side. Ma'am, you need to leave, one of the guards said firmly, taking her arm. Glory tried to resist, but the whispers and judgmental stares from the crowd made her retreat. As she was escorted out of the ballroom, her dramatic entrance ended with a resounding door slam. For a moment the room was silent. Then Stanley turned to Lara, his face a mixture of gratitude and admiration. You didn't have to do that, he said softly. Lara smiled, placing a hand on his cheek. Yes, I did. Nothing and no one is going to ruin this day for us. The pastor cleared his throat, regaining the attention of the guests. Now where were we? He said with a smile lightening the mood. Ah yes. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. As Stanley and Lara kissed, the room erupted into applause and cheers. The tension melted away, replaced by joy and celebration. The newlyweds walked down the aisle hand in hand, their love shining brighter than ever. But while the day ended in triumph, the shadow of Glory's outburst lingered, a reminder that the past was never truly gone. The wedding might have ended with smiles and celebration, but for Stanley and Lara, the days that followed brought a subtle shift in their relationship. The memory of Glory's intrusion lingered like a dark cloud over their newfound happiness. Though neither of them admitted it outright, the tension was undeniable. In the days after the wedding, social media buzzed with stories of the dramatic interruption. Influencers, bloggers, and even national tabloids ran headlines about the beauty queen's failed attempt to sabotage the wedding. Some praised Lara's composure, while others speculated about Stanley's past with Glory, painting him as a man with a trail of broken hearts. Lara tried to ignore the noise, but the whispers reached her ears. Did you ever love her? Lara asked one evening as they sat in their sprawling living room. Her tone was casual, but her eyes betrayed the weight of the question. Stanley hesitated. I thought I did, he admitted, his voice low. But looking back, it wasn't love. It was infatuation, maybe. A mistake. Lara nodded, but the seed of doubt had already been planted. What else about Glory hadn't he told her? Was there more to their story than the brief snippets he had shared? The tension deepened when Glory resurfaced, this time through carefully calculated whispers. Mutual friends began dropping subtle hints about things Glory had said. She painted herself as the victim of Stanley's ambition, claiming he had used her fame to boost his status and discarded her when she was no longer useful. Some of these rumors reached Lara, fueling her insecurities. Lara didn't confront Stanley right away. Instead, she began to notice things she hadn't before. The way Stanley avoided certain topics, the guarded look in his eyes when she asked about his past. She started to wonder if there were other secrets he was keeping, things he was too afraid to share. One evening, while Stanley was out at a business meeting, Lara found herself scrolling through her phone, rereading some of the articles about their wedding. One headline caught her attention. Stanley Okafor's ex claims to have shocking secrets about the tech mogul. She clicked the link, her curiosity overpowering her better judgment. The article didn't reveal much, just vague accusations and cryptic quotes from Glory. But one sentence stood out. Stanley has skeletons in his closet that would make anyone think twice about trusting him. Lara's heart raced as she put down her phone. She told herself that Glory was just bitter and trying to stir up trouble, but the doubts gnawed at her. That night, as Stanley lay sleeping beside her, she stared at the ceiling, her mind racing with questions she didn't dare ask. The next morning, Laura decided to do something she had never done before. She went to Stanley's office unannounced. She told herself it was just a casual visit, a chance to surprise her husband and spend time with him. But deep down she was looking for answers. When she arrived, Stanley's assistant greeted her warmly and led her to his private office. The room was immaculate, filled with state-of-the-art gadgets and sleek furniture. As Laura waited for Stanley to return from a meeting, her eyes wandered to his desk. There, among the neatly stacked papers and high-tech devices, was a small locked drawer. Laura hesitated. She knew she shouldn't invade his privacy, but the curiosity was too strong. She tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Just as she was about to give up, her eyes caught sight of a small key sitting in a nearby pen holder. Her hands trembled as she unlocked the drawer and opened it. Inside, she found a stack of documents and photos. At first, they seemed harmless. Old business contracts, photos of Stanley at various tech events. But then she saw a picture of him with Glory. They were smiling, their arms around each other, and Glory was wearing the same red gown she had worn to their wedding. Beneath the photo was a handwritten note in Glory's unmistakable script. "We could have been perfect together. You'll regret letting me go." Lara's heart sank as she stared at the note. Why had Stanley kept it? Was he still holding on to something from his past? Before she could process her emotions, she heard footsteps approaching. She quickly closed the drawer, locked it, and placed the key back where she had found it. Stanley entered the office, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Hey, what are you doing here?" he asked, leaning down to kiss her cheek. "I just wanted to surprise you," Laura said, forcing a smile. Stanley didn't seem to notice her unease, but Laura couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled upon something she wasn't supposed to see. As they drove home together later that day, her mind replayed the image of the photo and the note. She wanted to confront him, but fear held her back. What if he lied? What if her suspicions were true? In the weeks that followed, Laura became more withdrawn. She started to see Stanley's actions through a lens of mistrust. When he stayed late at the office, she wondered if he was really working. When he received calls from unknown numbers, she couldn't help but think of Glory. Stanley, noticing the change in Lara's behavior, tried to bridge the growing distance between them. "Is everything okay?" he asked one evening as they sat in their home theater, watching a movie neither of them was paying attention to. "I'm fine," Laura replied, her voice clipped. "Are you sure? You've been distant lately." "I said I'm fine," she snapped, immediately regretting her tone. Stanley frowned but didn't press further. He knew something was wrong, but he couldn't figure out what. Little did he know, Laura was carrying the weight of secrets she had uncovered, unsure how to confront him without unraveling their fragile peace. As the days turned into weeks, the cracks in their marriage deepened. What had started as a fairy tale love story was now shadowed by mistrust and unanswered questions. And lurking in the background, Glory watched, biding her time, ready to strike again. The once perfect marriage between Stanley and Laura was unraveling. The joy that had defined their early days together had been replaced by a heavy silence, punctuated by fleeting glances and half-finished sentences. The mistrust simmered beneath the surface, and neither of them had the courage to address it openly. For Laura, the discovery of Glory's note and photo had planted a seed of doubt that refused to be uprooted. She began to question everything: Stanley's feelings, his loyalty, and even his love for her. Her nights were restless, her dreams haunted by the image of Glory in her red gown, standing triumphantly at their wedding. Stanley, on the other hand, couldn't understand the sudden shift in Lara's demeanor. He missed the warmth of her laughter, the lightness of their conversations. He tried to rekindle their connection with grand gestures, lavish dinners, surprise getaways, but nothing seemed to work. The wall between them only grew taller, and Stanley started to wonder if their love was strong enough to withstand the strain. One evening, as they sat in their sprawling living room, the tension reached a boiling point. Laura, unable to keep her suspicions bottled up any longer, turned to Stanley with a look of determination. "Why do you still have Glory's photo?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. Stanley froze, the question hitting him like a slap. "What are you talking about?" "I saw it," Laura said, her eyes filling with tears. "In your office. The picture of you and Glory and her note. Why do you still have it?" Stanley ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched across his face. You went through my things? Don't turn this on me, Laura snapped. I need to know, Stanley. Why are you keeping mementos of a woman who tried to destroy our wedding? It's not what you think, Stanley said, his voice rising. I kept that photo as evidence in case she tried to pull something crazy again. That's all. Do you expect me to believe that? Laura shot back. You should have destroyed it. You should have gotten rid of everything that tied you to her. Laura, I've moved on. You're my wife. Why are you letting her come between us? Because she hasn't left us alone. Laura yelled, her voice breaking. She's still out there spreading lies about you, about us. And I feel like you're not telling me everything. Stanley stared at her, his own emotions threatening to spill over. What do you want me to say, Laura? That I made mistakes? That I didn't see her for who she really was until it was too late? I've been honest with you about everything. Have you? Laura whispered, her voice heavy with doubt. The room fell into a painful silence. Stanley looked at Laura, her face etched with sadness and mistrust, and realized that their love was slipping through his fingers. He reached out to her, but she pulled away, retreating to their bedroom and closing the door behind her. In the days that followed, things only got worse. Laura withdrew even further, and Stanley threw himself into his work, avoiding the painful reality of their crumbling marriage. They lived like strangers, their once vibrant home now filled with an oppressive silence. Then one fateful day, Glory reappeared. Stanley was in his office, reviewing contracts for a new tech partnership, when his assistant informed him that someone was demanding to see him. Before he could respond, Glory stormed into the room, her face twisted with anger and triumph. You can't ignore me forever, Stanley, she said, slamming a folder onto his desk. What do you want now, Glory? Stanley asked, his voice tired and laced with frustration. I want you to know that I'm not done with you, she said, her eyes flashing. And neither is Laura. Stanley's heart sank. What are you talking about? Glory smirked and pushed the folder toward him. I did some digging and I found out something interesting about your perfect wife. Take a look. Stanley hesitated before opening the folder. Inside were documents, photos, and messages that painted a disturbing picture. According to Glory, Laura had been involved in a questionable legal case years ago, one that had ended with allegations of bribery and corruption. Whether the accusations were true or not, Glory had framed the narrative to make it look damning. You're lying, Stanley said, his voice shaking. This isn't real. Oh, it's very real, Glory said, her tone dripping with satisfaction. And if you don't do what I say, I'll make sure the whole world knows about it. Your wife's reputation will be ruined and so will yours. Stanley stared at the folder, his mind racing. If Glory's information was true, it could destroy everything he and Laura had built. But more than that, he felt a growing sense of betrayal. Why hadn't Laura told him about this? That evening, Stanley confronted Laura with the folder. She looked at the contents, her face pale, and then at Stanley, her eyes filled with fear and regret. Why didn't you tell me? Stanley asked, his voice breaking. Why did I have to find out like this? I wanted to, Laura said, tears streaming down her face. But I was scared. I thought I could leave it behind, that it didn't matter anymore. I didn't want it to ruin us. It's already ruined us, Stanley said, his tone hollow. The conversation ended with Laura retreating to their bedroom, leaving Stanley alone with his thoughts. For the first time, he questioned whether their love had ever been real, or if it had been built on a foundation of lies and half-truths. In the weeks that followed, their marriage deteriorated completely. Glory, true to her word, leaked the information to the press, sparking a scandal that engulfed Stanley and Laura. Friends turned their backs on them, business deals fell through, and the public's admiration turned into judgment. Stanley and Laura, once so full of love and promise, became strangers bound by pain and mistrust. Their once lavish home felt empty, a hollow shell of the life they had dreamed of building together. In the end, their love story didn't have a happy ending. It was a cautionary tale, a reminder that secrets and mistrust could poison even the strongest bonds. As Stanley sat alone in his office one evening, staring at a photo of their wedding day, he realized that happiness, once lost, was almost important to reclaim.